Why is building a business easier than growing your marriage? It always appears that, at least from the owner's standpoint, that it seems like being in business, building a business seems to be a little bit simpler or easier or maybe more satisfying or whatever than really doing it for your marriage.
Yeah, because if I was to ask you, honey, do you want to go to marital counseling or go to a business consultant to help us move our business, to the next level, what would you say?
Well, I would probably rather go to the seminar for business.
I figured that.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
All right, honey, big question. Why is building a business easier than growing your marriage?
Is this a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question. But as you know, the work we do, and even us and our own upbringing and all that, it always appears that, at least from the owner's standpoint, that it seems like being in business, building a business seems to be a little bit simpler or easier or maybe more satisfying or whatever than really doing it for your marriage.
Yeah, because if I was to ask you, honey, do you want to go to marital counseling or go to a business consultant to help us move our business, to the next level, what would you say?
Well, I would probably rather go to the seminar for business.
I figured that.
So, just being, honest here, and speaking for the guys, right, especially generalizing with men, that it's, I think we're more comfortable in business than we are in dealing with marital issues. So,
yeah, because you don't have to talk about your feelings.
Yes. So let me tee it up a little bit. Let me give you some comparisons. Okay. In business, as business entrepreneurs, we're willing to go get some consulting help, some outside help in building our business, doing marketing better, going to these business seminars and workshops, right? Even run ideas with other business owners, spending more time in the business, think and talk about it constantly, and resolve problems, right? Whatever issue is in the business, we're going to do what we can.
You're going to tackle it head on.
Yeah, to solve that problem. Well, in marriage, and I'll speak for some of us guys here, we will avoid going to counseling, right? Attending a marriage seminar, as you asked, talking to a friend or mentor or someone about, getting some feedback or insight to marriage, spending more time at home or with their spouse, with our family to really, they're wanting more of you. And so, we don't kind of seem to resist sometimes, or we come up with excuses. And we avoid also thinking and talking about our marriage constantly with our spouse, our feelings, as you brought up earlier. So if you can literally do a contrast side by side, right? In business, we'll do this. We'll go to get a consultant or hire a consultant, but we won't go to a marriage counselor, right? We will go to a business workshop, but we will not go to a marriage seminar, marriage weekend, right? So it's interesting that you can compare and contrast both of those issues. And then you wonder why our marriages don't thrive as well as it could, right?
Yeah, I remember someone saying he was a head of a big, huge corporation, ran it really tight. It was very successful. And then when he got home, everything just fell apart because he just like, I'm home now. Let's, whatever happens, happens. And he didn't take some of those principles that he could have in a leadership home with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't think it's necessarily a gender issue. I just think it's the way we're raised.
Yes,
right?
I
So
agree.
As men, as males, we were raised to do things and to provide for the family and to achieve. And achievements for things that are outside the house, whether it's our grades, sports, and then, of course, your career or your business, right? We are recognized by our accomplishments outside the home and outside relationships. And we don't get the affirmations about, when you have healthy relationships, not just with your partner, your spouse, but even friendships or with your parents. And so we're just the way we've been raised. We are more comfortable and probably a little bit of, we all like to have some kind of self-affirmation, some kind of, have gratitude shown to us. And we get that from our achievements.
Mhm.
I remember in sports, like even my first, when I won a dodgeball game for our team in the third grade, how they carried me off the court into the classroom after PE. That was my first taste of, appreciation. And, I fed off of that, and you
Mhm.
liked it. And then I went to sports and then grades, when I got good grades. And of course, in a career, we get awards, you get bonuses, right? You get recognized. And, we don't necessarily often get recognized at home. So I guess maybe we can start there.
Mhm.
Is we don't often get that recognition at home. It's more,
Can you take out the trash?
exactly. That's what we get. That's what I get. Take out the trash. Have you picked up the kids? Have you done these errands? Here's a honey-do list, right? And especially the longer you've been married, the more and more of those things you have, and the less and less of those affirmations that you receive.
Well, and sometimes I think too it can be challenging because you're so independent with your whole career. You worked, in sales and marketing, and you had a team, yes, but mostly you were on your own, and so that also would spill in at home. You're like, oh, I can just take care of it myself.
Yeah.
I don't need any help.
Yeah, and I guess I was kind of raised to be independent too.
Mhm.
My dad, and there's some periods of time where both my parents were working. And so, I remember I'd wake up and I'd be, alone, and I had to, get ready, go to school and all that. So there's periods of that time, but also just, I guess, the way my dad kind of raised me was probably a lot of, we weren't necessarily encouraged to ask for help or to seek advice. And my dad wasn't necessarily ready to give you advice either. It was really, kind of operating independently. And so, of course, when you do that, then when you get married, you don't know how to relate on a relational level when you haven't been raised that way.
Yeah, and I'm probably more of a team player. So sometimes that could get a little challenging for me. Even though growing up, we had a lot of similarities in backgrounds. But personality wise, I like to have a group of people around me, a team when we're doing something, whether it's work or something fun. I enjoy that.
Yeah. And I've gotten better with it. I do it in sports. I did in sports, and of course in my corporate career, I knew how to work well as a team. But I think in marriage, it's probably a little different dynamic. I think when you're, in business, it was really about what we need to do. It wasn't about sharing feelings, right? It was, here, we got a job to do. Here's our goals. Let's go for it. And marriage is not necessarily like that until you do sit down with your spouse and start to map out a vision for the future and establish some goals, not just in business, but even on a personal level. And also getting that praise. Like I said, I think it goes back to the praise. I didn't get a lot of that growing up. So, which means, I'm always operating independently, and, I knew how to get it in business and sports. But then, at home, and then of course, when we got married, I think you've been really good at that. And I haven't, wasn't always reciprocating that, especially as we got married, because that's not what I was used to. Now, in our weekly meetings and our morning prayer, we do that, and I do that. It's gotten better, but, there's a lot of marriages where you don't do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you don't have those regular check-ins and affirmations and praise from your spouse. So, of course, what happens if you're not getting it at home, you're going to seek it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that is for entrepreneurs, it's going to be in our business. When we get that sale, that big client, that big contract, whatever that big thing is, especially monetarily, you feel that you feel, that you get those pats in the back and those attaboys and all that. Even if you're just working for yourself, but there's a sense of gratification and satisfaction, right?
Well, and maybe there's also a sense of control about your business in the day, because I remember my dad would work 6 days a week. And as a child, I thought, oh my gosh, I think he'd rather be at work than at home, because having to deal with 4 strong-willed children, he could go at work and do his own thing.
And so, we are, growing up, my dad was a pastor, but they didn't, they weren't always communicating well. And I never saw them go to counseling. They never went to a marriage seminar. I don't know if they ever even put on a seminar at church, but, there's, you kind of pattern what you grew up with. And so the things that we're kind of outlining before in the front end of this episode about what we tend to avoid when we get into marriage, a lot of it is because you're tapping into your feelings, and as men, we're not raised to express our feelings and to value that. It's really, whenever you're sharing your feelings or emotions, it's usually a sign of weakness, right? And so, of course, on the marriage side, when your spouse, which is a woman, are more in tune to their emotions and their feelings, and they want to express that, right? And of course, we don't want to talk about it, and even don't even want to hear about it sometimes, unless it's a positive feeling. So just again, going back to the way we're raised, and of course now we don't like to discuss our feelings and all that. So those are the things we tend to avoid.
And I didn't grow up in a home either that talked about our feelings. Our motto is you just don't talk about it, you just stuff it. Yeah. You don't ask questions. So I had to learn to get in touch with my feelings. So that wasn't an easy thing. And it still can be challenging for me at times.
Yeah. So what can we do about it? Right. I mean, because like I said, we started this title of this episode is about, why is growing your business so much easier than growing your marriage? And so we kind of outlined some of the characteristics, the traits of, what we're willing to do in business, but we're not willing to do in a marriage. And I think, if you really want to have the best of both worlds, you really want to have better balance in your life, where your home is thriving, your marriage is thriving, and your business is growing, then kind of the same effort, I guess, you're putting into your business, put into your marriage. And it's not necessarily going to rob precious time away from your business.
Well, and I think a lot of times we have visions and goals for our business, but we don't necessarily have that for our family and our marriages.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, where we don't have a true long-term vision. And so because of that, it's almost like we're just living life. Mm-hmm. We don't really have anything that we're working towards together. We're just, doing life, paying the bills, taking the kids to soccer practice, just doing things, but not necessarily very intentional of that. The things that we're doing is actually building towards something.
And it's something that we love. And it's a conversation that we can have. We help our clients with it all the time. That's a healthy and it's a fun one, because sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to come up with something to talk about besides the kids or the business.
Yeah. And we're just, have a young guys I mentor once a month for coffee. We meet once a month for coffee, and we just had that this morning, and one of the guys was talking about, I need to start dating my wife again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that'd be fun.
And so
I love that idea.
Talking about, we need to have things to talk about besides the kids and work and the church and all that kind of stuff. And so so that got brought up today is, how to start dating your spouse again and doing the things you used to do when you're dating, and, revive that. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that we stopped doing once we got married, right? So,
I don't know why that is, but yeah.
Well, it's, we were talking about that because, we were, men were created to hunt and kill, right? And then once you bring the kill home, you're done, right? So the hunt and kill in this case is like getting the wife. And then once you get the kill and you bring them home and get married, you're done, right? So sad to say.
Sad.
I realize that, Eddie, but that's also the reality of how we're thinking, kind of how we're conditioned. And so therefore now we got to say, okay, no, wait a second. That's not right. Right. We're not supposed to just give up once we get married. And of course, you've seen those jokes, those memes and stuff on Facebook or whatever. It's like, you're working out, you're chiseled when you're dating, and then the moment you get married, you're just eating, watching sports, and drinking beer on the couch, right? And getting a belly.
It used to be fun. We go out. Now everything's just going to heck.
Oh, we still have fun. We go out. We go out a lot. Don't let her kid you.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But you see that happen all the time. Like I see it happen with women. Like they lose all this weight because they're getting married. And I swear, like at the wedding, they are eating everything in sight because they haven't ate for like the last 6-8 months to get into this dress. And then as soon as the wedding day, at the reception, they just let themselves go. And they're like, oh my gosh, they're like catching up for the last 6-8 months where they didn't eat.
Yeah. So, we got to look at, I don't say genetically, but, kind of how we've been raised as men, as women, we're just different, right? Women are more in touch with emotions, want to talk about it, men don't. And so hence, it's scary for us to want to do things that tap into emotion. So like getting counseling. So of course, you got me into counseling before we even got engaged.
Yeah, wasn't that
right?
smart?
Yes, it was smart. I mean, that was smart on your part. After 4 dates, you got me into counseling. Of course,
I don't know if I would ask now what you'd say. I mean,
and it's funny, going to counseling or going to marriage seminars and stuff. It's like, I can go into a meeting or a business seminar or conference or whatever, even speak in front to hundreds of people, not thousands, and that's fine. But then going into a marriage seminar, it's like you're scared, right? I think you're scared about the kind of questions are going to come up, and we got to talk about our feelings, and we got to talk about stuff. It's very kind of a naked feeling. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, very.
You can go into more of an intimidating, business and corporate like setting, but when it comes to marriage, it feels like it seems like it's more intimidating than the other stuff. And so, spending more time at home. So a lot of times there's some marriages I know, some owners are, I guess they're more comfortable in business, and so they actually tend to spend more time in it because they're more comfortable there, and spending less and less time at home because they're uncomfortable in it. And so, I think if you're recognizing that as husband and wife, is especially when you're on the receiving end of that, like if you're the wife or even the husband, and you're noticing your spouse spending more and more time away from home, a big question is the why.
Yeah, the business becoming the mistress. And why is that?
Maybe a business issue or may not be. I think you said before about your dad. I think he didn't come home because he didn't want to come home, I think.
Well, I think he just didn't want to deal with it all.
Yeah.
There was like so much commotion going on all the time. And, 4 kids is a lot. And I think he could just, if he's at work, he gets his lunch break. He gets to be around his friends, his customers, doing something that he loves. And he doesn't have to deal with any of the emotional stuff.
Yeah, and it's probably more controlled. He knows how to deal with it too, right?
It's a controlled environment at work.
Yeah, even if the business isn't going on, something bad happens, whatever, you just kind of know how to deal with it, right? Where at home, you don't know how to necessarily deal with it, especially because a lot of it is more emotional. More emotions are involved, and you can't just flip the switch. You can't just solve the problem by, making another phone call or throwing money at it or something, right? There's not like a fix per se, other than spending time listening, empathizing, those kind of things that are very uncomfortable for us guys, especially. But, when you're recognizing that your spouse is spending more and more time away, then the big question is why. And before you just start making the accusations about, oh, you don't care about us and you're
always
your time.
working.
Yeah, you're always working, and more being critical about it. It's probably worth it to really just kind of be curious and finding out why. And that way you know what to fix per se. I mean, and how do I say this? Because when it comes to, usually there's some kind of issue going on at home they're not comfortable with, and then they want to spend more and more time away. And so we don't like to admit it, but it takes two to tango. When there's any kind of conflict at home, it's both of our faults. Right? We both have a part to play, and so we have to be able to recognize that and say, okay, what's my part in this, and how can I make things more comfortable for you to spend more time at home? And it could be just a simple fact as, getting the recognition and praising your spouse a little bit more, right? It could be as simple as that, or it could be a little bit deeper.
Well, and I like the idea. Just be curious about it and ask some questions, as opposed to like, you're never home. You're always working. Do you not want to be with me? Because then we start getting clingy, and then that kind of chases them the other direction, as opposed to finding out what's going on, just being curious and not making any judgments about it at all, because it might not be what you think.
Yeah. And it goes, what I said earlier is, especially as men, we know how to get that praise, especially in business. Right. We know, and it goes for women too. When you're in your business, you know how to get that recognition, and you know what feels good. You have accomplished something. And then when you're not getting it at home, you're right. You just tend to feel more comfortable in business. And so, if you start to criticize your spouse because they're not spending enough time at home or attention, and they're spending more and more time at work, criticizing them is not the way to start. right? Because if they're already feeling disconnected at home, being criticized about it is going to just make it worse.
Make them shut down more and be home even less.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really about being genuinely curious and then being open-minded enough to know that you've got a part to play in this, right? I know, hey, you know what? I have not praised enough. I have not affirmed how good of a breadwinner you are, and the things that you do, the hard work you do in business so you can provide for the family, and the times you do spend times with the kids or spend time with me, and recognize those things, right?
Look for the best.
Acknowledge the things that they have done, not just pinpoint the stuff that they haven't done. Because if you're like me, right? If Kaylee, talks about, me not putting the toilet seat down.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, wait a second, 99% of the time I put it down. And then the one time I don't, or the few times I don't, she calls it out, right? And I'm like, wait a second, that kind of totally just like discounting the other 99% of the time, right? Of course, you don't do that anymore because I said something that was like, wait a second here, that's not fair that, that you recognize and you only acknowledge the time I don't. Then you might as well recognize all the other times I do, right? Say if you're going to recognize each time I don't, then you got to recognize each time I do. And then it would be, oh, thank you for putting the toilet seat down, honey. But anyways.
And this is very interesting because we did the 5 love languages, and words of affirmations is on one of the 5, and you did not come out high at all.
Nope.
And so Mr. He says he needs words of affirmations, even though I gave him to try and give them to him as much as I can, but he didn't score high on that. All of a sudden one day you decided you really liked it. Affirmations.
Well, I think part of it too was that I recognized, I think especially going to counseling, I recognized the criticism issue, right? Because I was like that because my dad is like that. So I had to recognize how critical I can be to you, and had to kind of watch my tongue because, like just what I'm just sharing right now, and my dad did to me, the only times that he talked to me a lot of times was, because I got a B or a C on my report card and missed a free throw, right? It was always pointing out the things I didn't do or didn't do well and not enough praise. And so when, during counseling, was recognizing that I was doing the same thing, that all of a sudden now I have a heightened awareness about affirmation. That's what happened. So it's your fault, Eddie. You told me to go to counseling. So I started to recognize that. So wait a second, that doesn't feel good when, most of the time I do this, but the few times I don't do it, that's when I get acknowledged.
And so you can see how we triggered each other because I grew up with the same background. My dad was criticizing all the time too. So he would say something, Robert would, and then I'd feel like he's criticizing me, and I'd say something to him, and he's like, feels like I'm criticizing you, and we're in the crazy loop.
Crazy cycle. Yep, exactly. So I think, and so here in Seguro, this is kind of typical, right? I'm sure this sounds familiar. And so really got to recognize, how do we speak to each other? I think the more we start to affirm each other, the more we'll be, especially as men or people that aren't, and sometimes it's, some marriages the opposite, one sex is more in tune with their feelings and emotions than the other. At least, at least husband and wife, I won't say sex, but either it's one or the other typically are more in tune with their emotion than the other. And so you got to recognize that the need that even if, if someone like me that even would say they're not a words of affirmation person, but actually everybody, I think, thrives on it, right? Because if you don't get the affirmation verbally or even acts of service or whatever your love language is, you're going to look for it from somewhere else. Bottom line. And so you might as well get at home and make sure you're giving that at home to your spouse. You'll see those, especially whether it's going to counseling or marriage seminars, you'll see your spouse be more open to doing those things when you are positively affirming them, right? Not just criticizing them and then say, okay, we got to go to counseling because you're a piece of crud, right? But when you're giving affirmation to your spouse, and then they're going to be more open to those other things, right? Because I think subconsciously, when the communication environment is not healthy, then when your spouse is saying, "Hey, let's go to counseling," I'm just going to think that, oh, you're just going to ambush me with the counselor, right? But if you've been affirming, if things, at least our communication is getting healthier, or we give more positive words to each other, whatever, then when the communication or the marriage counseling issue or even the seminar issue comes up, I think we become a little more open to it.
Well, and I think more couples are going to be wanting to hang out with you more too when you're positive. There's nothing more uncomfortable than hanging out with a couple that somebody's so negative to their spouse the whole time. It's like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? It's like kind of zaps your energy and you think, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again.
Yeah, it gets kind of awkward, right? They have little kind of little jabs here, back and forth, and then it's kind of awkward and at the table, and you just kind of get quiet. Right? I think we've been in those situations and it's got, oh, that's awkward. Yeah, for sure. So anyways, that's a little bit about how, why growing a business is easier than growing your marriage. And so I think it's really important for you to recognize that and understand why, right? And so you can take some steps to fix that, and then also be intentional about pouring into your marriage, right? It's surprising. It doesn't take that much effort, energy, and time. It's just more intentional time, right? Having those moments and even just be minutes of connection, every day with your spouse, and, how asking how they're doing and how can you serve them, and giving some kind of affirmation or serve them well, right? How can I serve you today? Or, whatever that means.
Finding out what your spouse's love language is and just pouring into that. I mean, checking in with them on a daily basis. We all want to know what we're cared about and asked how our day was and what can I do to help you, as you were saying, for serving.
So I hope this helps. I hope this episode was helpful for you. So please go ahead and share this with another married entrepreneur that needs to hear this, because I think we can all relate to this topic, right? Yes. This is sometimes more comfortable than trying to work on our marriage, but we want you to do both well. So we want you to work on both of them intentionally. So until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.